Yes, the video, the lecture, all the lectures are going to be recorded and they will be posted on a YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. That's especially for the class. So if you like have a problem, accessing or have an internet issue, you can always go to the YouTube channel and check out the lecture. Okay. All right. Well, one siguro house issue muna, no, yung sa exam ninyo. So we did a survey and mukhang Sunday yung preferred na sorry, hindi, baliktad pala, sorry, no. Ang quickly titignan ko lang yung survey results. Mukhang yung exam nyo kasi we have to settle it. May mga issues kasi doon sa schedule. And we need to settle it kasi ilalagay na natin sa syllabus ninyo. Ang pinaka preferred is, it's Saturday afternoon. So it's the same thing. Kaya lang may klase yata may mga klase ng 3 to 5. So I'm going to propose that the exam become something like 1 to 2 or something like that. So magiging ganon kasi para hindi masagasaan yung may klase ng 3 to 5. So far, yun lang naman ang naging objection. The least unavailable pala. Most available time slot is Saturday to Yeah. So mga exam nyo siguro would be 1 o'clock. Okay? Meron bang may objection doon? Baka meron na tayong masagot. Kasi i-schedule na natin, ang exam nyo is going to be from 1 o'clock. May humihingi ng break na hanggang 1 to 2 lang kasi, and I've explained why, because of the cheating that has been happening. Now, may suggestion naman na magkaroon noong, what do you call that, safe recorder or something, but may nag-complain naman na may problema sa laptop nila. I will check with the IT, but for now, it's going to be 1 o'clock. Exam nyo is 1 o'clock Saturday. So yung sa schedule natin, I'll just replace the dates and then we'll send the syllabus to you, to all of you, or to post it on Uble for your reference. No? So kung may mga issues pa, bring it up now kasi gagawin na nating final yung scheduling exam. So we're keeping the dates. It's just the time that we're changing. It's going to be starting at 1 o'clock. Now let me decide or let me think about whether I'm going to extend it kasi hindi maganda talaga experience ko. Ginamit ng estudyante yung time na yon para para mag-confer yung extra time. And whether you know it or baka hindi nyo pa alam, baka just in case you don't know, your classmates do get really, really upset when people cheat. So I wouldn't try it. And please don't naman. Kasi I'm not a happy warrior, but I will file a case against you if that happens. And I will take it up to the end. Don't make this uncomfortable and really awkward for all of us. So please don't. And I know I keep saying this, and then people will say, or students will say, but those really that have such questionable characters will pursue it anyway. And I will consider that as a mark of your character if you insist pa rin on cheating. Now I understand, and I've talked to people about why they've cheated. And it's because the class is hard. Unfortunately, I can't do anything about that. But if your response to something that's hard is to do something dishonest, then that says a lot of things about you. Ang buhay talaga mahirap. 102 will not even compare to the kind of difficulties you will encounter in life. So what are you going to do? You will cheat your way through life. And 102 is something manageable, but life is hard. Just in case you don't know yet. And 102 is one of the more manageable things. If you're going to cheat in 102 or in your classes, I can't imagine how you're going to manage life. You're going to cheat your way through everything. Good grief. Anyway, so ayusin natin to, no? So please don't. One way or the other, I will find out. And when I do, my God, I will run after you for sure. But I just hope that you don't do it out of being honorable rather than me trying to scare you, because I don't really like scaring people. Okay, having said that, let's talk about microeconomics. Meron pa ba ako nakalimutan, Eddie, Ralph, or Patricia? Meron pa ba tayong house things na kailangan i-discuss before I proceed? Did I forget anything?
Wala na naman po.
Wala na. Okay, so let's continue. No? Today we're going to talk about microeconomics, pero we're going to deal first with what is economics. At the end of the day, kasi talagang mahirap ang material. Bakit mahirap ang material natin? Kasi abstract ito eh. Hindi siya mahirap kasi math, hindi siya ma-math. This is algebra. Gagamit lang kayo ng simple algebra, which I think at this point, kayang-kaya nyo, walang problema. It's just that it is difficult. The subject matter is difficult. No? This class is difficult because of the fact that it's a little abstract. It's like explaining what is red, and what is blue. Things that would require a lot of imagination for you to appreciate. And please don't be scared that you don't understand, and that we're here to help you. Just don't cheat. We're going to help you as much as we can for you to understand the concepts and for you to make it. Our objective is not for you to fail, for you to have a difficult time, but really for you to understand. So help us help you understand. So a lot of the things we're going to talk about in this class is going to require imagination and empathy. Naku, baka wala kayo nun. Do you know what empathy is? It's the ability to feel and understand what other people are going through or what people are feeling. Kasi we're going to study behavior. And this may not be your behavior, but what we're going to talk about is the behavior of the average person. Okay, the behavior and the reason we're studying behavior is because we would like to somehow affect behavior. Kasi this is the reasons. This is one of the reasons why we have taxes, we have subsidies, etc. In economics, these are the tools that we use to alter behavior, and we're altering behavior because, as economists or as policymakers, we understand that there are some things that need to be changed because it's harmful for society, or that we would like the economy to move in a certain direction, maybe correct, maybe inflation too high. And the reason that all these things are happening in the economy is because the people that comprise the economy are behaving in a certain way. Kaya may mga economic policies, may economic, may fiscal instruments o mga monetary instruments na tinatawag, which we will discuss. Some of which we will discuss, some of which we will discuss in 100.1. But that's the reason why it takes a lot of imagination. You will be asked to imagine what would happen if there's a tax. What would happen if we change price? What would happen? What would the average person do if we initiate, let's say, may externality, or yung pollution, what if there's pollution? What if we impose a tax? What will happen? What will happen to the behavior? But then at the same time, what will happen to prices? At the same, yung buong konsepto na yun. So, mahirap yung material because it requires you to be imaginative and to have empathy. Hindi siya mahirap gawin. Ibig sabihin, wala naman most people think kasi most students are afraid of math. Hindi siya ma-math. Hindi will not require you to do calculus kasi this is a class for non-majors. So everything is really just about concepts. But then we will be applying these concepts to specific problems and specific issues in the real world. And that's what we will require your imagination and your logical reasoning. So I trust that you trust yourselves when it comes to imagination and logical reasoning. And if there is a problem, and if you can't, fully understand it, it's a concept. No, and I try to make you explain what is blue, diba? What is red. Then ask for the help of your teaching fellows or my help. Ask for more examples. So during your discussion classes, ask for more examples that will clarify the concepts and clarify the things that we will discuss in class. A lot of which I think are exciting and interesting because sometimes they delve into psychology, they delve into sociology. In many instances, it's putting all these things together. So may novelty doon. So hindi ko alam ang background nyo. I'm guessing a lot of you are from BA, maybe poli-sci, merong medyo siguro engineering. And I don't know in those disciplines ano ang primary skill na ginagamit ninyo. But in this class, you will use a lot of empathy, imagination, and creative thinking. And logical reasoning. Kasi talaga namang logical, behavior ng isang tao ganito, behavior ng consumer ganito. Then you have to piece together, or if we introduce tax, what would happen to this person? What would the behavior of this person be, or a firm? All right. So you'd have to imagine you're a firm. You'd have to imagine that you're an owner of a firm. How would you react to, let's say, a subsidy or a pollution tax and things like that? So having said that, sige, discuss muna natin basics about economics. No? Dali lang. Pumapasok pa pala. Dali lang, ha? I need to screen share. Can you see my slides? By the way, I can't see you kasi naka-tablet ako. So once I start the screen share, I can't see anybody else. I can't see anything other than my screen share. So you'd have to, verbally tell me that there's a problem or that there's something you can't see. So okay na ba to? Can you see my slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so this is Economics 100.2. Now we're going to discuss Chapter 1. All right. So what is economics? First and foremost, I'm not sure kung alam nyo na to, but we're going to discuss it anyway. Now, this is the beginning part of the class. What is economics will be discussed in both 100.1 and 100.2. So economics is the study of how societies use scarce resources to produce valuable goods and services and distribute them among different individuals. Okay, so let me just, alam nyo kasi nung tinuturo ko to noon before the pandemic, Blackboard ang ginagamit ko, hindi ako gumagamit ng slides. So ngayon, kailangan kong gumamit ng slides, hindi ako sanay masyado. Anyway, pen. Alright. Okay, sige. So, please take note of this. Scarce resources. So, the reason na may economics, merong pag-aaral, may isang disiplina na tinatawag economics. Ang take-off point nito is the recognition that resources in the world are scarce. Ibig sabihin, limited, or well, ang direct definition ng scarce ay konti. But when we define konti in this context, it's really with reference to the supply and the demand. Kasi scarce siya kapag mas mataas ang demand kesa sa supply. So it doesn't matter kung gaano kadami, kahahog, plentiful, bountiful yung isang resource. If the demand is bigger than the supply, we call it scarce. All right. And when we say demand is bigger than the supply, it's not just now, but across time. All right. So it's not just the present generation, but also the future generation. So economics is the study of how societies use scarce resources to produce valuable goods and services and distribute them among different individuals. So keyword is scarce. The next is production, which is valuable. Sinabing valuable kasi kailangan may demand, no? Hindi naman wala namang demand ang isang good kung hindi siya valuable or meron siyang value. No? So the word value dito, valuable naman. Okay? Goods and services kasi hindi lang naman goods ang production kundi services. Pag sinabing services, yun yung mga let's say airline, 'di ba? Yung not the tickets but yung service ng airline or yung tourism, those are services na yung hindi naman talagang may concrete, no, merong isang tangible na good but service, yung pagtulong sa iyo, 'di ba? Yung mag-hire ka ng laborer, that's service. Hindi naman yung kanyang labor hours is not a good but it's a service, no? And then distribute, so it's how societies use scarce resources to produce valuable goods and services and distribute them among different individuals. Kasi isa sa mga sasagutin natin is, okay, now that we have production of goods and services, how do we allocate this among the different members of society? Okay, so that's the point. Okay, now what else? Oops, sorry. Here. Pala pwede itong off muna natin. Okay. All right. So economics explains behavior. And I've already said that earlier. Economics explains behavior, and it also explains the differences in the state of welfare or the state of happiness or comfort of a person. So economics is a study of how society or how to use scarce resources so that you can produce the most amount of valuable goods and services. And so you can allocate them among different individuals. Now, ano ba ang objective ng allocation among different individuals? Kasi gusto mong ma-maximize yung tinatawag na welfare, which is this one. Ay, nako. Mali naman ako. Alright, mamaya na. So, yung state of welfare, in the state of happiness or comfort of a person. Pag sinabing welfare sa context natin, it is the state of wellness or the state of happiness or the state of comfort of an individual. All right. So economics also examines the reason for trade and explains the behavior of those who engage in trade. So economics is also a study that it tries to delve into the reason why people behave the way that they do. You know? And one of the things that people do is that they trade. Di ba, you buy and you sell. Diba? And there's all on a daily basis you trade. Everyone on a daily basis trades. You go out of the house, you take a Jeep or take Grab. That's a trade. Kasi you're exchanging your money for a service. Diba? You go somewhere, you buy let's say lunch. That's a trade. Lahat yan trade kasi may exchange. And the reason that you engage in trade is because you want to increase your welfare. So it goes back to welfare. Now, why do people behave the way that they do? Because there's an objective of improving your state of happiness or welfare. Okay, so economics also tries to explain how government policies can be used to pursue the goals of a country, such as economic growth. So dito sa economics, maraming bagay tayong pinag-aaralan. No? Maraming applications yung pag-aaralan natin. Merong tinatawag na applied applications or applied economics. No? May mga iba-ibang klase ng applied economics. One of which is yung public policy economics, so public economics, yung how government policies or how government behaves. And later on, I'll talk to you about the three basic entities in an economy: the consumer, the firm, and government. So economics tries to study, or economics studies the behavior of all of these entities, how they make decisions, not only how, but exactly what would be their decision based on the objective of increasing welfare. Itong tatandaan nyo, ang perspective ng economics is that everybody behaves the way that they do. No? So consumers, individuals, people, even sectors, no? Behave because there's an expectation of gain. Ibig sabihin, meron silang mapapala. Think about it also. Kayo ba meron kayong ginagawa daily, in your daily life, na walang ibig sabihin? Ibig sabihin, ba't ka natutulog? Ba't ngayong umaga matutulog ka? Kasi expectation mo, pagod ka, gusto mong magpahinga. And so kapag nakapagpahinga ka, ibig sabihin yung welfare mo tumaas kasi nakapagpahinga ka, di ba? But and then you're making a decision, manonood ba ako ng Netflix or manonood ba or mag-gym ba ako? Those are two decisions, no? And again, yung choice mo, yung behavior mo or your leaning towards one choice is governed by your expectation of gain. Alin ba doon ang mas makakapagpasaya sa'yo? Manood ng Netflix o mag-gym? Makipagkwentuhan sa kaibigan mo o magluto? Yan ang mga choices. No? So you weigh the cost and benefits of every choice that you make. And economics is your guide. Economics tries to organize the thought process, the decision-making process, for us to understand and appreciate. And why do we need to understand? Because we're going to engage in policy making. At the end of the day, the use of economics to a country is, well, for policy making in order to understand what is not working, what's not making people better off, and to address them so that welfare will be generally increased. Okay, so recap, no? So economics is the study of how societies use scarce resources. Kasi itong the way that we increase welfare from the point of view economics is by consuming goods and services. Right. So that's why sentro sa economics yung scarce resources, the use of scarce resources to produce goods and services. Because ito take off point natin, syempre some people will disagree that the way to increase welfare is through consumption of goods or the use of services. All right? And then baka naman isipin nyo ang kitid naman ng pag-iisip na yon na goods and services, but everything is a good. Now, even everything, you can consider anything that will give you benefit is considered a good. And how you acquire a good entails cost. Diba? Kung matutulog ka, that's a good. You sleep is a good, in a sense. No? So, what is the cost? I mean, what is the benefit? Di napahinga ka, napahinga isip mo, that's the benefit. No? So, tumaas yung state of happiness mo. But what is the cost? The time. Kasi time is, in this sense, cost isn't just about money, but it's about what you give up. All right? So, the time that you gave up, that's the payment for sleep. Alright, so natulog ka, meron kang benefit, gumanda pakiramdam mo, napahinga ka, but the cost is the time that you have to give up. No? Hindi ka nakapagluto, hindi ka nakapag-gym, or kung ano man, hindi mo nakausap ang mga kaibigan mo. That's the cost. Okay. So, puntahan naman natin yung tinatawag na fundamental problem. Actually, it's not problem, fundamental problems that fundamental problem na nga, that economics tries to answer, and that is how to use scarce resources efficiently. And so ang keywords dito sa problem na to is scarcity and efficiency. So dalawang bagay ang nakapaloob dito sa fundamental problem na to. Ay yung word na scarce o scarcity, meaning kakapusan, kapos, kakulangan, and the other is efficiency. So, ano bang ibig sabihin ng efficiency? Yung pagiging, yung kumbaga the biggest bang for the buck na tinatawag. No? Ibig sabihin, when you make an effort, yung ability to produce the maximum amount of good or the maximum amount of output with the least amount of input. No? So efficiency, kumbaga, di ba? Pag hindi ka efficient, ibig sabihin madaming natatapon, maraming sayang. So, ang economics, ang sumasagot sa tanong na how can we use scarce resources very efficiently. So, ibig sabihin, yung kakaunti nating resource, paano siyang magagamit ng to the maximum amount. Ibig sabihin, efficiently. So pag sinabing efficiently, konti ang tapon. So you're able to produce as much as you can given a fixed amount or a certain amount of resources. Okay? All right. Now, there are two basic subfields of economics. One is macroeconomics, which is the field in economics that examines the aggregate economy and behavior of the economy as a whole and all the variables that affect the aggregate economy. All right. So, pag dito sa macroeconomics, which is 100.1, ang objective is to examine the behavior of the aggregate economy. So buong economy na yan, we're not looking at individual stakeholder or individual agent, hindi katulad sa microeconomics. So dito tinitingnan sa macroeconomics, tinitingnan inflation, behavior of prices, behavior of the entire economy, foreign exchange, interest rate, yung behavior ng interest rate, all of these, of course, are affected by individuals. Pero hindi yun ang inaaral ng macroeconomics. Ang inaaral niya yung final outcome, which is the rise or decline in interest rate, the rise or decline in prices, etc. So yung behavior ng entire economy, it's called macroeconomics. So you can think of it as parang pag sinabi nating UP students versus individual UP students, So pag sinabi, ang mga taga-UP kasi ganito mag-behave. Pag binigyan mo ng ang mga pag sinabing, okay, UP students, ang mga taga-UP ay ganito ang magiging behavior as opposed to an individual UP student. So sinabing UP as a whole as opposed to yung UP, let's say an economics UP student versus a BA UP student. Tapos merong parang as a whole, yung UP students in general. So maaaring isipin mo as that. So macroeconomics is the aggregate economy and examines the behavior of the economy as a whole, whereas microeconomics is the field in economics that studies the individual actors that comprise an economy. All right, so microeconomics studies why individual actors, consumer, producer, and government behave the way that they do. All right, so yun ang difference. So sa macroeconomics, entire economy, all right, and you're not making a distinction between the consumers and the producers. But here, in microeconomics, we do, because we're studying the behavior of the individual actors in an economy. Okay, now, some things to clarify lang na pagdating sa pag-aaral ng economics. We use the scientific approach sa pag-aaral. Now, di ba sabi ko sa inyo na kanina na the difficult part about studying economics or microeconomics is hindi naman siya difficult, I would think, I actually don't consider it difficult. It's just that siguro hindi nyo ginagawa on a daily basis, but we analyze kasi all the time, so we observe, we create hypotheses, we test hypotheses. That's the scientific approach, and essentially that's what economists use when we examine issues or we try to explain behavior or we try to study behavior. We observe, we create hypotheses, and then we test the hypothesis. So dito pa lang sa line na to, observe, create hypothesis, test hypothesis, kikita nyo na what's involved. It involves an analytical mind. Now, alam ko lahat kayo may analytical mind, but perhaps it's not something that you use extensively on a daily basis. But since you're in this class, you would have to use that more regularly. You have to be constantly observing, creating hypotheses, and testing hypotheses. So in creating hypotheses, we use theories and concepts about behavior as basis. So that's why we have economic theories and concepts, kasi may mga take-off points yung economics. When I say take-off points, meron siyang mga assumptions about individuals Yun ang theories and concepts. No? So kung let's say isang concept sa economics ay pagsasawa o yung hindi yung tinatawag na satiation o pagsasawa. That's so may theory sa economics na tinatawag na diminishing marginal utility, which essentially is about sawa. That's a theory, all right? And that's a concept that we use to explain behavior. So some people will stop or will not, let's say, will not order as much of a certain good after they've already eaten. For instance, no? Diba, kahit na mahilig ka sa sinigang, pero kung nakakain ka na, mate-temper yung desire mo to buy more sinigang or to buy more chocolate, halimbawa. No? Kasi meron kang pagsasawa. So yung take-off point na yon o yung take-off concept na yon, that's what we use to create hypothesis about behavior. So why are we creating hypothesis and testing hypothesis? Kasi at the end of the day, we would like to know how an individual will react to a tax, will react to a subsidy, will react to a price increase, will react to advertisement, etc. So we observe, we create hypothesis and test hypothesis in order to determine or to predict what the behavior of an individual will be to certain policies or to certain phenomenon. Okay? So to test the hypothesis, we build economic models. And what are economic models? Ito yung medyo madugo. Hindi naman tayo we're not going to build economic models. We're just going to use existing economic models in this class. So pag-aaralan na lang natin yung mga existing textbook models. Hindi na tayo gagawa ng bago. But models are simplifications or simplified representation of the world. And models are used to explain behavior. Alright? So ang isang paraan to test hypothesis is first we create an economic model, and then we test kung tama yung model by using actual data. So we collect data, specific and real world data about prices or about reaction of people or firms or consumers to certain things. So let's say when you increase the price as opposed to when you decrease the price, to compare the data on demand, and then you compare. That's how we determine what the reaction is of people to a price change. Okay, so and one thing to note is that economic analysis is based on logical thinking. So hindi kayo dapat matakot kasi kung logical naman kayo, kung may logical thinking kayo, then you'll be able to handle the material in this class. As I said, this is not mathematical. We have some math, maybe mathematical reasoning, but you won't be solving much. But it would require you, pag sinabing mathematical reasoning, it's really more just being logical. So it's, if you have a logical mind, at hindi naman ito far-fetched na logical thinking. This is, in a lot of talaga instances, it's just common sense. How people would react to a certain stimulus. You can use yourself as a model. How would you react to something like this? And if that's not clear to you, then you try to predict how would your mother react? How would your friends react? A friend who's a girl, a friend who's a boy, a friend who's old, or maybe your parents. How would you react? How would they react? That's logical thinking. That's how. And then if you're able to explain why they would react in a certain way, that is logical thinking. And if you're able to do that, you should be fine in this class. Okay? All right. So, ano pang mga kakailanganan natin for this class? Okay, well, dali lang ha. All right. Well, we need to be, because we're going to do logical thinking, logical analysis, then it's necessary for you to be aware of certain logical fallacies. No? These are the things we avoid in this class. Kasi if you commit these logical fallacies, it will bring you to a wrong conclusion. So there are many logical fallacies. Kaya nga may logic na class 101, o Philo 11 ba yun? Does anybody know? Ano yung class about logic? Is it Philo 11 or Philo 101? Anyone?
Philo 11 po ata, sir.
Philo 11. Ayun. Di ba yun yung may yung logic, di ba? Nandun actually madami pang logical fallacies, pero dito itong pinaka-common na nangyayari o nako-commit ng mga analysts. So our book highlighted these fallacies as the most common, which we would like you to avoid. First is what's called post hoc fallacy. It's a fallacy that occurs when we assume that because one event happened before another event, that the first event caused the second one to occur. Yung tinatawag, alam niyo ba yung term na non sequitur? Natin yung aking magic pen. Non sequitur. Ginagamit, ano yun it's non sequitur meaning it doesn't follow, no? Non sequitur. It's Latin for it doesn't follow. Non sequitur, it doesn't follow, not in sequence. Right? So it is a fallacy. Well, the general fallacy is called post hoc fallacy. No? Just because one event happened before another event, the first event must have caused the first one. Alam niyo, bawa yung alam niyo ba yung sinasabi na okay, yung pangyayari halimbawa na okay, nagkaroon ng earthquake pagkatapos nilang nagkaroon ng earthquake pagkatapos nilang kumain ng sinigang sa ilalim ng coconut tree. Then may post hoc fallacy o may wrong conclusion na kaya lumindol kasi kumain sila ng sinigang sa ilalim ng coconut tree, sa ilalim ng buko. That's a non sequitur, no? That's a post hoc fallacy. Hindi siya, it doesn't follow na just na dahil kumain sila doon na para maraming false information ngayon na nag-exist sa social media na nakikita ko. Maraming pinopropagate itong post hoc fallacy na yun yung misinformation or fake news sobra. Nako. At karamihan ng fake news are just logical fallacies. Sobrang dami. At malalaman mo na agad na fake news siya kung gagamitin mo lang ng konti ang iyong logical reasoning. So, yan ang isa, post hoc fallacy. The other is failure to hold other things constant. Actually, ang tawag namin dito, o gagamitin natin ang term na to ay ito yung ceteris paribus. Failure to hold other things constant or failure to ceteris paribus. Kasi ceteris paribus means keeping things constant or keeping things the same. Parang yun yung, I can't remember the direct English translation of this Latin phrase, but something like that. Ceteris paribus means keeping things the same or keeping things constant. So common logical fallacy is failure to uphold ceteris paribus or failure to hold other things constant. Okay, so ano ibig sabihin nun? Okay, well, we need to acknowledge that there could be several things affecting the same variable at the same time. So we cannot attribute the effect of one variable on another without holding the effect of other variables constant. So, halimbawa, bakit naman? Bakit? Anong example nito? Halimbawa, ito. Ito common Marcos fake news. Nung panahon daw ni Marcos, gumanda ang ekonomiya. Okay, so bakit gumanda ang ekonomiya? Kasi tumaas daw ang GDP nung nag-declare si Mao ng una, na what do you call this, nung nag-declare ng martial law, pala post hoc fallacy yun, nung nag-declare ng martial law, tumaas ang GDP. Okay. Now, una, may post hoc fallacy doon kasi one does not necessarily follow after that event. The other is failure to hold other things constant. Kasi ang variable na nag-change doon ay nagkaroon ng crackdown sa mga insurgents. No? So, ibig sabihin, yun daw mga maiingay hinuli. And as a result, tumaas yung GDP. Now, what they're saying is that that the variable that affected GDP was the peace. Halimbawa, na magkaroon daw ng peace. Kunyari, walang peace noon. Diyos ko, pinapatay mga tao noon. Kaya lang, they failed to hold other things constant. Kasi ano ba nangyari noong mga panahon na yon? Yung panahon na yon, nagkaroon ng malaking demand for agricultural products, which has nothing to do with martial law, which has nothing to do with yung nangyayari sa Pilipinas. Worldwide, nag-change yung preference ng mga Europeans, Americans, at ang laki-laki ng demand for agricultural products. So, dahil ang Pilipinas ay isang agricultural country, marami siyang production ng agricultural goods, tumaas yung demand for agricultural production of the Philippines. So that meant tumaas din yung GDP kasi exports is net exports, no? Net trade natin is positive. So tataas yung GDP mo kasi ang net exports mo mataas. But they fail to hold other things constant. Dapat kung gusto mong malaman ang effect ng let's say pag-declare ng martial law on GDP, you have to hold everything constant, including yung demand ng for your product. Kasi then you make this post hoc fallacy na kaya tumaas ang GDP dahil dun sa pag-declare ng martial law. Halimbawa. Now that's one example. Another is halimbawa, sabihin mo okay, nung tumaas kapag tumaas ang presyo ng isang produkto, bababa syempre, no, in-expect natin bababa yung what you call this, yung demand for, let's say tumaas ang produkto, ang tumaas ang presyo ng t-shirt, diba, no? Tumaas ang presyo ng t-shirt. Tapos so you would say na okay, bababa ang demand for t-shirt kasi tumaas ang presyo. True. But kailangan ceteris paribus. Ibig sabihin, you have to hold other things constant kasi kapag tumaas ang presyo, syempre ang natural reaction ng mga tao ay babaan ang consumption nila kasi mas mahal. Pero kung sumabay na tumaas ang income ng mga tao, maaaring hindi bumaba ang demand for the t-shirts kasi tumaas yung income ng mga tao. So yung relationship, the negative relationship between price and quantity, ibig sabihin pag tumaas ang presyo, bababa ang quantity. That only happens if you hold income constant. Kasi kung pababayaan mong mag-fluctuate din ang income, maaaring tumaas ang presyo, tumaas din ang demand. Kasi mas malaki yung taas ng income kaysa sa taas ng presyo. Alright? So, failure to hold other things constant will lead you to the wrong conclusion. No, if maring nakita mo tumaas ang presyo, tumaas ang demand. So therefore, ang conclusion mo ay kapag tumaas ang presyo, tataas ang demand. That's logical fallacy kasi you fail to hold other things or other variables constant. Alright. So the other is yung tinatawag na fallacy of composition. Tatlong major fallacies itong common na included natin dito sa list na to. The third is the fallacy of composition. Ito naman yung it is false to assume that what is true for the part is also true for the whole. Halimbawa, if a farmer harvested a lot and makes a lot of money from his harvest, then conclusion is if all farmers harvested a lot, then also everyone will make a killing. That doesn't follow. Kumbaga parang what is true for one individual is not necessarily true for the entire society. Halimbawa, what's good for one UP student is not necessarily true for all UP students. That's a fallacy of composition. If you make a conclusion on what's good for one is good for the entire lot or the entire group. That's called the fallacy of composition. So be careful to make that conclusion. You cannot make a conclusion that just because it's good for one person, it's good for everyone. All right, it's just good for that person alone, period. All right, so if you want to know what's good for the entire lot, then you have to engage in an analysis that examines the behavior of the aggregate rather than the individual. So ibig sabihin, hindi mo pwedeng pag-aralan ng isang tao at sabihin na, okay, everybody in the economy will perhaps do the same thing. No, in this class, di ba pinag-aaral natin ng individual, we're making a claim about the average person. But we're not necessarily saying this is going to be true for all people. Because it's not. We're only taking yung pinaka-common, yung pinaka-average. But we always recognize that people are different and some people may behave differently. Okay? Alright, so concept check naman tayo. Ito yung mga bagay na kailangan yung ma-master, no? Yung graph. And what is a mathematical function? What is an economic model? So ano ang graph? Pag-aaralan natin yan, most of the things that we're going to look at, yung mga mga models natin, graph. Ano ba itsura ng graph? Ayan, halimbawa na ng isang graph, napapakita ko na, ay blue para maganda. This is a sample of a graph. That's a graph. Anong ginagawa ng graph? Let's say ito'y graph na we're trying to relate price and quantity demanded. This is a graph. All right? So it's a picture. It's a graphical, graphical representation of the world. So kapag ka meron kang curve na ganito, what does this graph tell you? It tells you the relationship between price and quantity. So ibig sabihin, ano ba to? So ibig sabihin, when you, dito sa graph na to, when you increase price, quantity goes down. Kasi makikita mo na, diba, habang, what do you call this? Ito yung, pagka this is price 1, this is Q1. Pag binabaan mo yung price, gawin mong price 2, no, mas mababa siya dito eh. Quantity rises and vice versa. So ito, ang relationship nila. This graph tells you that. No? So a graph is a picture that tells you what the relationship is between two variables. Typical two-dimensional graph, ang pinapakita lang natin dito palagi sa graph ay dalawang variables. No? So it's price and quantity, income and quantity, cost and or subsidy and production, the level of etc. So those are variables that we relate in a graph. Okay, so now, what is a mathematical function? Well, alam niyo naman ang function. It relates, again, it's like a graph. It relates to things, two variables, or three, more than three. No? Mas dynamic ang, mas marami kang mai-include sa isang mathematical function kasi hindi siya two-dimensional katulad ng graph. So dito naman, let's say you're talking about demand is a function of price and income. This is a function. So maaari, palagyan na natin in price na lang no, para simple. So this could be quantity demanded is equal to A plus, let's say, a slope P price. That's a function. This is a function. This is a simple function. And most of the things that we'll talk about in class are just simple functions. Yung ganitong linear lang. No? So, and then we'll tease this out. So what is A, what is B? So ito yung slope, ito yung intercept, ito yung variable. This is quantity and price, which we are trying to relate. No? So this is Q and P pa din, pero in a mathematical function. And then lastly, what is an economic model? Well, an economic model is all these things. An economic model is a representation of the world. No, a model in general is simply either a graph or a function. It becomes an economic model if if we're relating economic variables such as price and quantity, tax and quantity, etc. But that's the only reason we call it an economic model. But otherwise, it's just a graph or a function. All right. So it's a logical representation of a logical maybe illustration katulad ng isang graph, or a logical mathematical representation of the world. So that's a model. Okay, so the goal of economics is really to improve the living conditions of citizens and their everyday lives and standard of living. So yan ang sinasagot natin sa economic analysis natin. The goal of economics is to improve the living conditions of citizens. Remember that good intention is not enough to improve lives. That's why we need to have an information-based plan. Kaya may economics. Kasi ang intention ng economics is to contribute to decision-making. So good intention, which is the basis for decision-making, is not enough to improve lives. Kasi baka mali yung decision mo. And so economics provides inputs to these decision-making, no? Para hindi maging mali. So, take-off point natin dito sa economics is free market, which is often associated with economics, but does not automatically result in equality. So, sentro ng discussion natin is free market, pero later on in our discussion sa semestring ito, we will also talk about whether free market is equitable or not. Ibig sabihin, does it push towards equality? If not, then may imbalance sa economy. How can economics still help in order to correct those imbalance? So economics provides an objective view of the problem and presents choices based on logical analysis that society can choose from. So economics is a discipline that tries to help, to serve as an input towards decision making. So ultimately, the ultimate decision should not be based on economics alone, but other factors that society attaches values to. So ang economics, sinasabi lang niya na ito yung input namin, this is what we think. But when we make decisions in society, it should not be based on economics alone, but other factors we should also talk about later on that society attaches value to. Kasi may mga bagay na hindi pwedeng mabigyan ng bigat in terms of money. No? May mga certain, like awa, compassion and everything, those are not necessarily quantifiable, but they should be there anyway, pagdating sa decision making. Okay, the three questions that economic answers. So mapapansin nyo pagka nag-discuss tayo, there are three questions that economics tries to answer. One is what good to produce and how much of it will be produced. All right? So that's the first question. There are three. Pag mapapansin nyo, lahat na magiging discussion natin tries to respond to these three questions. Will it be more, let's say, should the good be more consumer goods or more investment goods? Pag sinabing investment goods, goods that will be used for production, or should there be final goods? So, mga TV ba ang ipoproduce o mga bulldozer? So, and when will the goods be produced? And who is the priority? So, kailan ipoproduce ito? Kailan bukod sa what to produce, how much of it, kung combination, hindi naman kasi either or yan, kung minsan combination, pero how much investment goods and how much consumer goods will be produced. No? So, and what will the priority be? The next question is that we try to answer is how will the goods be produced? So alam na natin, okay, so alam na natin we want to produce, 10 units of investment goods, 5 units of consumer goods. And kailan? We will produce it this year. All right? And then ano yung priority? Unahin natin yung investment goods. Halimbawa. And then the next question that economics answers is how will the goods be produced? Itong how will the goods be produced is about technology, about efficiency. Kasi you want the goods you want to maximize the use of your scarce resources, diba? So, ibig sabihin, sasagutin mo yung tanong, well, in order to maximize your resources, how will the goods be produced? Okay? So who will produce? Sino ba? Ito bang agricultural sector? Ito bang mga Amerikano? Sino ba? Mga Filipinos pa to? Etc. And then what technology and inputs will be used? And then finally, the next question is for whom? Para kanino itong production na to? Who gets to enjoy the fruits of economic activities? Alright, so ngayon we know that what will be produced, we know how it will be produced. The next question is who gets to enjoy it? So are we happy that it is the rich only that will benefit kasi sila yung may pambili? But what about the poor? You know, how many poor how can the poor access the goods? And then kasi ang basis ng access to goods really is income, no? So what happens when you have no income, when you have no wealth? So ano ang response ng economy? So yung question ng for whom will the goods be produced is equally important. Kasi hindi mo pwedeng sabihin na, oh, sorry, wala kayong pambili, wala kayong access to goods. I mean, especially if it's food, basic commodities, then no wealth, no income, no access to wood. They can just die. Should we just let them die? Of course not, diba? So sasagutin din ng economics yung what do we do about those people that do not have income and therefore do not have access. So for whom, yes, for those who can afford it, for those who have income. Pero the for whom also nasasagutin naman ng gobyerno separately but still using economic analysis is how can we make those who don't have income have access to the goods and services? Okay? All right, it's 11 o'clock, so, or 1 minute before 11 o'clock. So we will end here and we will continue on Tuesday. Okay, so basahin nyo yung the rest of the chapter. So ang susunod nating topic ay ano ba to? Ang susunod nating topic ay yung organization ng isang economy. And ito naman para mas hindi kayo mahirapang sumunod, basahin niyo yung chapter 1. Okay? So maraming salamat. And we will continue the discussion on Tuesday. Ngayon kung meron kayong mga questions. Today pala is your discussion day, ano? So you get to ask your teaching fellows what, and if you have any specific questions in mind, or humingi kayo ng examples. Alright. I don't know how to end this. Ayaw niyang mag-end. Saan na ba yun? Nawala ako. Nawala yung Zoom. Kainis. Ay, nako. Alright. End. Okay, maraming salamat and enjoy the discussion classes today. See you all on Tuesday. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you rin. Sige, bye, Cheska.